Hello and welcome to Games That Suck, a gaming retrospective in the Shea Hates Everything podcast family. My name's Kyle, I will be your host today, and I am of course joined by my brother Shea. Welcome, Shea.
Hi, hello. It's almost the Willennium.
The Willennium? What is the Willennium?
Dude, gonna party like it's 19. Hold up, it is.
Dude, I don't get what you're saying.
You don't remember the Will Smith R&B hip hop banger?
I do
from
not.
1999, the tie into Men in Black.
I really
Gonna
don't
party
remember
like
that.
it's 19. Hold up, it is. Yeah, dude, it's 1999.
Dude, I have no idea what you're talking about.
All the other old people listening to this
That's
podcast
incredible.
will know.
Wow. Well, this isn't a podcast about Will Smith's, existing or not existing hits of the late 90s. This is a series where we go back and look at some of gaming's worst smelling games, the stinkiest stinkers of them all. Each episode, we're focusing on a particular...
more games to this list.
Okay, gotta get some more smell-related games on here. Every episode, we focus on a particular year in gaming, arguing about what the bottom 3 games of each year should be. And this month, we're talking about the games of 1999. We're gonna let Will Smith go on, keep slapping people at the award shows, and we're gonna talk about... Boy, that's really timely, huh? And we're gonna talk about, speaking of timely, some games from 1999. We have assembled a rogues gallery of end of the millennium titles here. Some real hits. Some fragrant cheeses. I'm trying to think
a lot of French. Are you going for like stinky? You're going to your time back
cheeses.
to the stinky games?
Yeah,
a lot of like French cheeses.
Yeah,
for sure.
And also, because we've talked about, the good games of like 98 and other years, those being like fine wines aging well.
Sure.
You cannot have a wine without pairing it with a fragrant cheese. So we can't have good games without bad games. You know what I mean?
The issue with that metaphor is you do age cheese also. So you can't say like, oh, this aged like cheese as a derogatory comment, because cheese does age, especially like, and a lot of people say the stinkier the cheese, the better it tastes. So I feel like we're losing this analogy. Let's go back to Will Smith.
Oh, okay, yeah. Let's talk about him some more.
These are the 2023 Will Smiths compared to the games that don't suck, which is the 1999 Will Smiths.
That's true.
There you go.
I recently
West.
watched all the Bad Boys movies, all 4 of them.
Bad Boys for Life.
Yep. That is one of them. Anyway, yeah.
Is it the 4th one?
No.
Bad Boys 4 Life.
No,
it should be.
I think there's. I remember there being something about the naming convention wherein they like dramatically fucked up somehow and missed an opportunity. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's not. You could tell I really cared about them.
Two Boys.
Yeah.
Or I guess it'd be like 2 Boys, 2 Bad.
Right. Yeah. 2 Boys, 2 Men.
Oh,
back to the
copyright
90s. All right. So we have some video games here to talk about in alphabetical order.
Do we? I feel like
we do.
I don't know what we're doing here.
There's not enough time in the world to talk about Will Smith, so we have to talk about video games instead. That's a far more approachable topic. The first video game we're going to talk about on our long list of bad games, before we pare it down to the short list and down to further to the bottom 3, our long list here, the first title is Austin Powers Operation Trivia, which released on Windows and Mac. Developed by Berkeley Systems, published by Sierra Attractions, with a game rankings aggregate score of 56.98, kicking it off with a barely above 50 rating. This is a strange one. I clicked, so we were going through the list of releases for 99. I clicked on this one because it said Austin Powers.
Of course.
It is such a strange... Like, what is the Venn diagram of people who like Austin Powers and people who want to play a trivia game about the movies?
I do
it's
think,
such a weird...
This game is a little bit a symptom of the era that it came out in, which was like the proliferation of more multiplayer in games, and also like the couch multiplayer in games that was collaborative and competitive, like the co-opetition thing, versus like trade-off multiplayer, which had, that's like from, way back in the early days in the 80s. But I feel like PlayStation 1 in that era, it came a lot of like couch co-op or like party games. We've got another party game, 2 party-ish games on this list. I feel like that's why. Though the question on where does Austin Powers come into a trivia game, that I do not have a good answer for, and I don't think anyone living does.
Right. I mean, the best answer I can think of is just it doesn't take a lot of money to make it. And so really any copies that they sell, they're turning a profit, maybe.
Sure. I do feel like it's I bet you it's kind of complicated to create a trivia game that is automated in this way. Not saying that it's like difficult from a gameplay design perspective or like a gameplay development perspective, but I bet you it is kind of complicated to construct all the if-then statements. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah, like time consuming for sure.
Yeah.
One weird thing to note is that so they had a PAL version because it's also released overseas, and like Austin Powers is a very like British series. Most of the characters are British. Austin is British. The PAL version, like a lot of the questions in the game are weirdly like American centric, and so the PAL version, which released overseas, like they had no reasonable justification to know the answers to like some of the more general trivia questions.
Amazing. So
it's just like a very strange, weird thing. Because like there are some questions that don't have to do with the franchise and the movies. Like some it has like some general trivia questions as well. And apparently those are all like very American centric in a weird way. Final wrinkle on this one: Berkeley Systems, the developer, they're the ones who made You Don't Know Jack.
I was just going to say, like, these types of games have always existed, and I feel like have come back in a big way. I think people got so sick of the online-only style multiplayer that they were looking for more of the party game style that they could actually play with your friends. And a game like You Don't Know Jack and Jack in the Box and those types of games have become super popular. So that's interesting that they made good ones of these too.
Yeah. And weirdly, like the publisher for this, Sierra Entertainment, or specifically Sierra Attractions in this case, but Sierra Entertainment, they published like King's Quest, Leisure Suit Larry, and Half-Life.
Yeah, they've been around long time.
For sure. They're huge. So that's just like a really, really weird one just to kick it off. Just like, why do you exist? Who were you really for? And I guess it's like, this is one of those Christmas gift things where it's like, oh, my nephew really liked those Austin Powers movies. Maybe I'll get him this CD-ROM of Austin Powers Operation Trivia.
And it was probably fun to play like one time.
Maybe. Because it had like it had like clips of the movies and stuff in it, but I bet they were all horribly compressed and like, no good. This one does not need to stick around in the short list. Just a weird one to kick it off with.
Yes, I would agree with that. The next game on the list is Beavis and Butthead Do You, also for the PC. This is from Illusions Gaming Company, published by GT Interactive. It is a game ranking score of 55.83. This is an adventure game that is mostly just Beavis and Butthead antics. It's not super interactable. Most of the scenes are just a way to set up their style of humor, which has never been my thing.
Sure.
I think that it plays even worse in a game like this, where there's just a lot of pausing and walking around the room to find things to click on and things to move around. And so you get the little interjections from Beavis and Butthead, like, that's stupid. Like it feels very lame.
Okay.
That might be filtered through my dislike for Beavis and Butthead, but I feel like kind of objectively it can be awkward at times.
Yeah, I didn't love Beavis and Butthead either. And I think, like, the weird pauses and strange pacing is kind of part and parcel with their comedy style, even in the show as well. But I don't think I don't think this is intentionally that way. I think it's an artifact of the medium more than anything.
Yeah, for sure. And I would agree. I think they have always had sort of a playing with the silence and the sarcasm type of thing, which honestly would lend itself to writing comedy for an adventure style game, but this was not successful. The bigger, more important part is, as an adventure game, it just fails because it is very boring and minimal, and it feels like this was just an excuse to like cash in on the popularity of the franchise versus trying to like actually make a good video game out of it.
Right.
That said, I don't think it's one of our 3 worst games.
Yeah, it's not.
It is a bad adventure game.
Yeah, for sure. Next is Blue Stinger. This was developed by Climax Graphics, published by Sega in Japan, but Activision worldwide. This one has a game rankings aggregate score of 69.77. This video game, so this was one of the Super Replay games at Game Informer, RIP in peace.
RIP. Yeah.
It was originally created as like a tribute to Western action movies. So there's a little bit of like Japanese I don't know what the Japanese Bollywood equivalent is. But
John Woo.
Sure. So it's like John Woo. And it's really, really strange because it's trying to emulate Western action style, but with the like Japanese game development sensibilities and things. Like, it shares some similarities with like original Resident Evil and Dino Crisis, where you're kind of wandering around areas collecting items to get you into new areas and other things, like solving puzzles that are mostly like item collecting and some light interaction with elements and stuff. But otherwise it's like a third-person action game that is extremely bad.
It looks very bad.
It's horrendous. I have a soft spot in my heart because of the Super Replay, remembering like watching that with the Game Informer community, and like chatting in the Facebook group with people about it as it was airing. But this game is like, in that community, this game is legendarily bad. Extremely frustrating, completely nonsensical. Like the combat the mechanics of the combat are somewhat inconsistent, but also just like really difficult to execute on because there's like animations are tough to read. It's like with the camera, it's hard to tell depth sometimes between you and enemies, and just the design of all of the areas. It's so like there are like motion graphics and neon colors all over the place, all over everything, so everything looks interactable, but like almost nothing is, except for like the one little thing that you do need to touch. It's just impossible to know what you're doing at any given time. It's very, very bad. It's a bad video game. Yeah, this one's kind of a special one because of how crazy off the wall it is. Like, they were really going for it, which, I mean, talk a little bit about their process. If they're trying to emulate Western action movies, you do kind of have to go for it. But right. I just think like execution wise, they were not capable of executing on that idea in a meaningful way.
I mean, I had not heard of this one prior to putting the list together, but watching some gameplay of it, I was like, oh yeah, okay. This sucks. For sure. yes, it does. But there's also like a lot of charm there because it's trying so hard and it cares about its world a lot. And like the characters are really wacky and zany. And so like there are things to like about it. It's just the act of playing it is kind of a nightmare. I would say, I mean, we've got a lot of games on this long list that have a lot of personality. Yeah. That personality is very much of its era, aka super cringe and often offensive. What I've seen from Blue Stinger, and I didn't watch the whole Super Replay, right? But what I've seen from Blue Stinger, it's a little bit more of an endearing quality.
It is.
Than it being a reprehensible quality like a couple of these other games later on.
Yeah, I think so. That's kind of where I fall on it. So I don't know that this sticks around in the short list. I think because of that reason.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
There are things to like about it. Like things that would at the time would propel you through the experience. Just because of how bought into itself it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's Blue Stinger. The next one is BoomBots. This was developed by The Neverhood Incorporated and published by South Peak Interactive. Has a game rankings aggregate of 56.53. This is a 3D fighting game. There are like some cutscenes up front that are like claymation, and the music's cool. Like it's a little bit like of a tone piece up front. You're like, okay, this is interesting. Like it's going for a style. That's cool. And then the gameplay starts. And
it doesn't look like that.
It doesn't look like that at all. It's horrendous.
Yes.
Absolutely horrendous. There are 15 characters to play as and 15 stages. Most of the game is just like, I don't think there was progress through the story. Yeah, I don't remember anything about the actual story. It was very like it didn't stick with me in any way. But the actual, I
just know that it's in space. That's the only thing I remember about it.
The actual fighting that you do is the worst part.
100%.
It's like the best thing to say about it were those claymation cutscenes. That's probably the only really good thing about it. Like,
yeah, and just the general
characters
tone, like,
look terrible in the actual gameplay.
I mean, we commenting on a lot of the personality in a lot of these games, and I think BoomBots fits that. I did find some of the irreverence appealing. So like I forgot this game existed until we were putting this list together.
Yeah.
And I distinctly, as soon I was watching gameplay, and as soon as it got into the game, into the fighting, I was like, oh shit, this is this game? Because I remember playing it at a friend's house.
I think I was there with you.
The same friend where I used to play Clay Fighters.
Okay.
And I remember playing BoomBots and him being so excited about BoomBots because it felt like it was going to be another game like Clay Fighters. And so you see the beginning of it in the tone and the irreverence and also like this sort of claymation style of the characters. And we were like, hell yeah, like this is a new version of that. And then you get into the actual fighting and it's this like super polygonal, awkward, terrible camera. It's like 1v1, but it feels like you're on like a Super Smash Brothers stage with all this like weird verticality, and it is so bad. And we may have never played it again after that first day. I have a memory of that first day, but yeah, I forgot this game existed until I started watching gameplay, and it brought up bad memories.
Yeah, I have played this game as well, and I remember how bad it felt. And again, I don't think I ever played it a second time either. BoomBots is real bad.
Yes, I think that should be our first additive to the short list.
Yeah.
BoomBots.
Oy vey. It's like there's just nothing to like about it. The actual video game part. And I don't even remember if the cutscenes like really had anything to do with the story that was going on. Because I know there's like each character has their own like little story thing. I don't remember if it's like a full set of missions for each character or whatever, but each character had like a story, I think in like a Twisted Metal kind of way, where like you go through the game and get like an ending with them or something like that. But I don't remember if the claymation cutscenes had anything to do with those like little character moments.
Yeah, I just remember. I don't remember the personalized part of it, but that could totally be there. I just remember fighting. You just basically fight the entire roster with each character, and that's what the story does.
Oh, maybe that's what it is. Okay. Yeah,
but there are like little cutscenes. I don't recall.
Yeah. All right. Well, BoomBots, you're sticking around.
BoomBots.
Jerk. Castlevania 64 for the Nintendo 64. This was developed by Konami and published by Konami with a game rankings of 72.5. Castlevania 64 is very bad. It is, I believe, the first 3D Castlevania game. And they did a bad job. They did it poorly. Not that I was ever like a huge fan of Castlevania, but this is... It's bad in all the ways that an early 3D action platformer can be bad in. Like, the camera is unusable. The like environments, like there's like some platforming elements to it, and the jumping, the platforming just doesn't feel right. You're like not getting enough good feedback about where your character is in the 3D space, and it's very punishing for you when you're not able to like make those platforming things happen. And like that, because those are not the interesting parts of a Castlevania. Like moving through the space is not the interesting part. It's like learning the map and exploring new areas and like unlocking a thing and then being able to go back to where you've been and like unlock a new area or experience that same place in a different way. I just do not remember any of that stuff sticking with me or enjoying any bits of it. It did the Zelda thing. You have like lock on when you're fighting. You have the whip, which is cool.
Yeah.
But I don't remember any weapon feeling like it was particularly good. Like, I'm sure there were weapons that were meant to be matched up with certain enemies, and maybe this was an artifact of me being a child when I played it, but I don't remember ever feeling like I could figure out the rock, paper, scissors. Like, what's good against what kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, man.
Did the lock-on help? Because I have not played this one. I'm familiar with it, but I've never played it. Like, did the lock-on help the combat?
It helped the combat, but then like you're still platforming through these 3D spaces, and so then your camera's fucked.
The cameras, yeah.
And like so it made navigating the areas during combat basically undoable half the time. I'm looking through just to see if there are any features that I've forgotten about. Yeah, it had like a day-night cycle that you could see on the UI. Where certain things, like you have to do certain things at certain times of the day. I don't remember that being particularly interesting, frankly. Clearly, because I had forgotten about it. Yeah. There was nothing that drew me in. Because I had tried the previous Castlevania games, the side-scrollers, and was not drawn in. And so I think I approached this one like, oh, maybe like in a new format, I would be interested in this. Because it's like, oh, it's like kind of more a mature game that maybe I haven't been able to play a lot of up until now. And so I remember trying it again at a friend's house because he didn't have an N64, and just being like, what is this? This is horrible.
Yeah, bad camera, man. Like that just completely ruins it.
Yeah, it just like not playable for me at the time. Yeah, and like this one is I think this one's pretty polarizing. I think among the Castlevania community, like some people like it and some people really don't. I don't know enough about the lore of Castlevania to be able to explain why, from a lore perspective, people might not like it.
Who cares?
Yeah, so I can't add to that at all. Anything meaningful there, but yeah, I just think it looks really muddy. Yeah. In like one thing I will say that's interesting is it's the most PlayStation 1 looking N64 game that I think I've ever seen. Because like it's all those like muddy browns and grays that were very popular in PlayStation 1 games, and it's kind of grainy in the same way. In a way that a lot of N64 games are a little more like sharp.
Like they're colorful.
They're lacking detail, but the images are sharper. Castlevania 64 still feels like the textures are really muddy in a PSX.
Yeah, it's kind of like I feel like a lot of PlayStation games, early 3D PlayStation games, were sort of trying to mimic more of a realistic style versus Nintendo kind of embraced the jank
Yeah.
of the polygonal characters.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel like you get, which is, it's ironic because this was an N64 game, but kind of to your point, it looks more like a PlayStation 1 game.
Yeah. And I think you're right, because it's trying to look a little more like have human looking characters and a setting that looks a little more believable and stuff like that. Certainly still has fantastic elements, but still trying to ground it like a little bit because it's more of a mature title.
Do you feel like this one stays? Like,
I don't. It's really bad.
It's on the higher end of the game ranking scores, which doesn't necessarily matter for our sakes.
Right.
It is just interesting to see.
And again, I think it's because it was
ones.
Polarizing in the community. Like, some people did really like it, and some really hated it.
Yeah, it's kind of that, like, hey, you're taking something that traditionally was in 2D that's really highly regarded and turning it into 3D. And so for a lot of people, just that in and of itself is cool and exciting and innovative. But maybe in hindsight, it's less so because we've played a million games like Castlevania 64 now, where, like, the newness of it isn't impacting our memories the way that it did at the time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it certainly looked bad to me. And that's also, I love Symphony of the Night. We talked about that, but that's kind of like the one Castlevania game that I am a huge lover of. So I don't even have a ton of attachment to the IP either. So
right. Yeah, I mean, between that and BoomBots, I feel like they're both kind of like BoomBots we feel more strongly about already.
100%.
So I'm okay leaving it behind.
Okay. Yeah, and it's not like we're deleting it from my memory. If we end up with
right
3 games that we don't love, we can always bring it back. Okay, moving on to Chocobo Racing for the PlayStation 1. This was developed and published by Square and also EA in America. It has a game rankings of 62.13. This is a trash-ass kart racing game. It sucks. The controls are terrible. The characters are so stupid. I would like to believe that Square, back in the height of its weird days in the 90s, they had people there that were like, this would be amazing and hilarious for us to make like a kart racing game based upon Final Fantasy, starring, a Chocobo, and not the cynic side of me, which is Final Fantasy is really popular, kart races are really popular. Like, I would like to believe that there was some passion behind this project. And it does kind of come through because there's like a story in this game.
That's
there are
weird.
Not like cutscenes, but like there's actual dialogue that happens. It comes across really poorly because it's all just kind of like static screens and of just like the characters standing there. The character models are really stupid looking because they're designed to fit in this like sort of chibi kart racing style, and so outside of that they look kind of dumb.
Oh, so this is like a chibi art style.
Yeah,
Okay.
kind of.
I'm
I mean,
looking it
the
up
best
right now.
version of that they could do with like a polygonal approach.
Right.
But the biggest thing is just like, as a kart racer, it totally fails. You like, look, I've been playing a ton of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe lately with my kids. That game rules. Mario Kart Through the Ages has been amazing. There have been plenty of other great kart racing games. This is totally a game that gives kart racers a bad name. You're just banging off the walls on every turn because the turning is so slow and imprecise. The tracks are like because they're all like, all the tracks are based on like areas in the Final Fantasy universe, right? But they're so uncreative. It's like caves and plains and some cities, but there's no oomph to the design, even taking out the fact that this game came out in 99, right? So it's not, fidelity's not going to be there, but they just feel very barren and lifeless across many of the tracks.
Yeah, this one I'm looking at right now could literally just have been taken out of any racing game. And there's just random models of things that like have nothing to do with Final Fantasy off to the sides of the track.
Yeah.
That's weird.
I'm not a fan. Not a fan of Chocobo Racing.
Yeah, it does not look
And
good.
I was very excited for it because I liked kart racers and just racing games in general at that time. I was a huge fan of Final Fantasy nerd. And so like it was exciting for me to get this cool kind of offshoot game, and it just played so poorly. Not fun.
Yeah, it certainly looks bad. Well, what do you want to do with it?
I would keep it.
Okay.
It might not end up making it, but we've only got one game that we've kept so far, so I would keep it for now.
That's fair. Okay. Next is Duke Nukem 0 Hour. This was developed by Eurocom, published by GT Interactive, which... What else did they... We just talked about GT. They did Beavis and Butthead Do You. Another banger, yeah. Duke Nukem 0 Hour.
They specialize in cringy, poorly aging comedy.
Yes. Game rankings of 67.34. This was on the N64. The frame rate for this was terrible. That was like the first bullet I wrote on here, and then in looking at it, turns out that's because of the expansion pack. So you could put the expansion pack in so it would improve the graphics, like what would happen with several N64 games. But in this one in particular, it would just tank the frame rate. So like the graphics would look a little better, but the frame rate was like unplayable.
It's just because it looks so good.
Yeah, man. Yeah, just really pushing the
yeah.
bounds of video gaming. This one, like Duke goes back in time to a bunch of different time periods. There's a Jack the Ripper section that, like... So I don't know how much people know about Jack the Ripper, but the legend of the myth of Jack the Ripper, is that he targeted women. So his presence in a Duke Nukem game, who legendarily objectifies women, is maybe a weird fit.
I think it makes perfect sense.
Actually, you know what? Now that you put it that way, it makes perfect sense. Because
in a derogatory way.
Yes. Yes. There are some problems with this video game.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's also like from a level design standpoint, it is not some of the better Duke Nukem level design.
Right.
It is not a good Duke Nukem game, and then there's also kind of some of like the uncomfortable traveling back in time and Duke being like a huge womanizer problems.
Yeah, I try to compare this game to the other similar-ish games on this list, like a Castlevania, like a Blue Stinger, and having not played those others, but having played Duke Nukem, I obviously am more passionate against Duke Nukem than I would the others, but even looking at old gameplay, to me, Duke Nukem just comes across as a worse game. It looks worse. The feel of movement and the jumping and the shooting is worse. Maybe not than Blue Stinger. That looked pretty fucking bad. But comparing it directly to Castlevania, which I know we cut, I would keep Duke Nukem.
Oh,
I would keep Duke Nukem.
Yeah, it is worse for sure than Castlevania.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like to be clear, like the Jack the Ripper thing, that's just one of the time periods in which you go to, like the Victorian England thing. Like there's a future thing. I forget you go to a city in the future. There's like a bomb or something. And then I think there's a Wild West level. There might be one more that I'm forgetting about, but like you go through various periods of time. It's just like the Jack the Ripper thing particularly sticks with me as like, now that I am older and have experienced more of life since I played this, I'm like, they could have just not done that.
Yeah,
they could have not.
Hey, it was the Attitude Era. Everybody was trying to be like in your face.
Yeah,
and
they were trying to be edgy.
Weird.
Yeah,
it's just an unfortunate time period that all we can do is look back with derision, which is what we're doing today.
That is what we are doing today. Yep.
So I think we keep Duke Nukem for
now. Earthworm Jim 3D for the N64. This is developed by Viz Interactive and published worldwide by Interplay Entertainment. Game rankings of 59.32. My main problem with this particular video game is the camera. It's a like pseudo fixed camera, but it is a 3D environment with platforming.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so enemies being off screen and shooting you is happening basically the entire game. This game is borderline unplayably bad. I don't think I have anything to say in defense of Earthworm Jim 3D.
I mean, it is clearly trying to ape its contemporaries, like a Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah.
And it's bad at doing that. It reminds me a little bit of Blasto that we talked about a couple podcasts ago.
I think Blasto's actually better than this game.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think this game is definitely worse than Blasto, a game that I did not enjoy, at least in terms of how it played, in a large part because of the camera. But yeah, the camera here, because it is so much more of a platformer than it is a shooter, it sucks, man.
Yeah, I also I don't remember, because Earthworm Jim, like the universe of Earthworm Jim, has fun stuff in it. I don't remember much of that making its way into this one. The other characters and
just the weirdness and personality. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. So the N64 version of this was actually published by Rockstar. The Windows version was published by Interplay.
Okay.
That's interesting. Published by Rockstar. Yeah, this is a bad video game and we should keep it.
I agree. Let me talk about the next game on this list.
Okay.
Because, hey, it's also an Earthworm Jim game, which is Earthworm Jim Menace 2, The Galaxy, which was a Game Boy Color game.
Oof.
I meant to mention this at the top, but it's fun to kind of put yourself in a time and place when we're talking about these games. And, we started in 1995, which was the launch of the PlayStation 1. So we're still a couple years in. A lot of the bad games we talk about are bad because they're taking 2D series and making them into 3D.
Right.
The camera is a big problem. The platforming is a really big problem. The graphics and the polygonal models are a really big problem. But late 98 is when the Game Boy Color came out. And I feel like in our memories, at least for me, the way I see people talk about it, is we kind of underrate the impact of the Game Boy Color coming from the Game Boy, which was such a simple handheld gaming device. And the Game Boy Color still was nowhere near as powerful as a home console, but just the addition of color was a huge deal.
Well, and the
higher pixel
screen,
count,
right?
It felt more like you were able to play your home games on a mobile device, far more so than to compare the SNES to the Game Boy,
right?
Which still, to me, felt like a pretty big difference in what you were doing and what you were able to do. So all of that to say, Earthworm Jim is not just like a Game Boy version of Earthworm Jim 3D. It's a totally different game. It is a 2D side scroller. It's a platformer. It is so fucking bad. It weirdly also has camera problems, which you weren't controlling the camera, but you are very zoomed in compared to most other side scrolling or a platformer games where you kind of have a good view of the environment around you. This is kind of focused in more on Earthworm Jim to the point where you oftentimes can't see the next ledge that you're trying to jump to, and certainly can't see enemies off screen or where you're supposed to go in terms of a larger map. And it creates this really disorienting experience trying to jump around, because also everything is so samey looking. The graphics are not impressive at all. And then the controls are compounded with that because they're super floaty and you kind of just hang in air as you're jumping, which makes them feel really imprecise and slow. I really, really hated this game. I'm not sure that it's worse than Earthworm Jim 3D. Oh, I don't know. I might actually hate the Game Boy Color game more. It's so bad. It also I hate the music in this game because it's Game Boy game, so it's very chiptune in its style, which I love. Have always loved chiptune style action adventure music. But this, it's got like the sci-fi thing that I like, but it sounds like you're at a circus or a carnival, like a sci-fi chiptune circus. And that, I don't know about you, that doesn't sound appealing to me, and it doesn't sound appealing to your ears when you're listening to the music. I fucking hated the music, which is something I will say for Earthworm Jim 3D, is like the music's pretty good. Because most of the music in this era is like pretty decent for a Nintendo game.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So I don't know. I mean, that's tough, because both these games aren't going to make it. I personally I think Menace to the Galaxy is worse.
See,
maybe
because I think like a lot of the problems with Menace to the like they both have gameplay problems and they are both boring.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're both bad in both ways.
Yes, and I think Menace to the Galaxy has so much less going on. That's also because it's a Game Boy game and not an N64 game, so you can't totally hold that against it in like a direct comparison.
Yeah.
I think let's just keep them both for now. And
Okay.
we're only looking for 3 games here. Like, neither of these might end up making it. So,
Right.
yeah, I feel like we could hash it out if it comes down to it.
Okay. Got it.
Next on the list, Final Fantasy VIII for the PlayStation 1.
You shut your
developed and
damn
published
mouth.
by Square and EA in America. It says a game rankings of 89.42.
Because it's a good game.
Which, look, Final Fantasy VIII is not going to stick around. I bring this up. It is no longer my least favorite Final Fantasy game because Final Fantasy 15 exists. But prior to like 2015, Final Fantasy VIII was the worst Final Fantasy game. That's not true. 10-2 is worse. It was the worst mainline non-direct sequel Final Fantasy game. It's
worse
mostly
than
because
16?
I was not including 16 because once 15 came out, I hated that game more than 8.
Okay.
But look, I haven't played more of 16 than just a demo, so I can't totally compare it. But yeah, it seems like 16 also is terrible. But look, the biggest reason it's on here is Final Fantasy VII is one of my favorite games ever made. It's amazing. It's one of the greatest games ever made. It got its laurels on our, games that don't suck list. And so with that context, Final Fantasy VIII was a huge disappointment to me. And I also believe to many other people. It is far and away the least bad game on this long list. We are going to cut it here, but I wanted to say it out loud because it is not a great game. It is not. An 89 is far too high of a rating.
Well, so I'm going to say a crazy thing. I
Go
think, and I have not played 8 in a very long time, but I think I like 8 more than 7.
Yes, but you have shit opinions about a lot of these games.
Oh, okay.
So I don't really care about what you think about it.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
though?
no, that makes way more sense now.
Like, you're the same person that was like, oh, Symphony of the Night, who cares? Oh, Super Mario 64, who cares? Like, you are regularly bringing to our Games That Don't Suck podcast just abhorrently bad information.
I like to think of it as a little sprinkle of Kyle brand chaos.
Ignorance. Poor taste.
Speaking of
stupidness.
Speaking of poor taste and stupidness, Mario Party for the N64.
Oh, man.
Developed by Hudson Soft, published by Nintendo. Game rankings of a baffling 77.57. I'm going to go ahead and move this game up. It's going to stick around.
But let's actually be real about it, though. Should it? Like, look.
Yes.
We hate Mario Party because it brings out the absolute worst in all of humanity.
No.
It's the monopoly of video games.
No, no. Mario Party does not bring out the worst in people. Mario Party just is the worst, and people are around it. Like,
it makes us worse, is what you're saying.
Yes, Mario Party actively, through its satanic influence. Right. I'm just kidding.
Yes.
It's so incredibly bad. And the people defend it in some sort of like a Stockholm syndrome thing. Like, just because we played 50 turns in this video game and like laughed at each other, it doesn't make it a good video game. It's maddening because there is no skill. There is nothing you can do to win the day.
Well,
it just
I would argue
victory or defeat
that
happens to you in Mario Party.
Dan Reichert at Giant Bomb sort of put the kibosh on that argument with how often he won at Mario Party. Like, there is an element of skill to Mario Party.
That is still random chance. It is still random chance because he has since lost Mario Party a few times.
Yes. Well, yeah, he's not going to win every single time. I do think there is skill to Mario Party. Is it the majority of the gameplay experience? Certainly not. Do I hate Mario Party? Yes. Have I had a lot of fun playing Mario Party? Also, yes.
I have never enjoyed playing Mario Party.
Well, you're one of those like anti-competitive people because you grew up around me and your mother, and we were so competitive that we made you want to run in the opposite direction of competitiveness.
That's fair.
So I think that's part of it. Like, I feel like any like house party style thing you tend to not like because you grew up playing it with me and mom.
Yeah, and you guys ruined it for me.
Yeah, totally.
That's fair.
I do not think that Mario Party belongs on our best games list, but I think trying to take the emotion out of it, which maybe isn't fair to do, but trying to take the emotion out of it, I don't think it's one of our 3 worst games on this list. I think it absolutely deserves its place as a wink wink nod nod joke entry because everybody fucking hates Mario Party except for the Stockholm Syndrome people. I don't actually think it's one of the worst games. But if you do, let's talk about it.
Part of it is also that like it's still going. And they're still pouring resources into this thing because people keep buying it. And people keep hate buying Mario Party.
Yes.
Because like, I'm going to force my friends to play this. Ha ha hee hee ho ho hoo. Like, go fucking stick your head in a pot of boiling water. Stop buying Mario Party. It's not
Mario
funny.
Mario Party is the April Fool's Day of holidays.
It is.
Okay. You're selling me.
Uh-huh.
You know how I feel about April Fool's Day. All right, let's get to the rest of this list. We should keep we'll keep Mario Party for now. We got to finish this list.
Next up is Pepsiman. You know, the video game made by Pepsi.
Every year we have one of these fucking games.
This was developed by Kid and published by Kid. Game rankings of 70 even. It's just one review.
So not an aggregate.
It's a single review of 70. This is like, you put it well, we were talking about this before the podcast, but you put it well. It's sort of like a, what runner did you say?
Like Temple Runner?
Temple Runner, yeah.
All the shitty games that we all played on our phones in like the early 2010s. Where it's just like a lane-based running game. And
you're like jumping over stuff, picking up Pepsi cans. Yeah.
You're moving left and right to try to get Pepsi cans and avoid trash cans and rocks and shit. It's an automatic runner where you're just always going forwards. Like it's really dumb.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's dumb enough.
I like the character Pepsi Man.
Sure.
Because he's just like a dude in a blue and silver bodysuit, and somehow he is Pepsi. I do like that, I guess.
Yeah.
Not enough Pepsi Man cosplay out there in the world.
And wouldn't be that hard to do.
No.
You just need like a latex kind of suit. Just dye it.
Yeah.
Dye it, Pepsi Man.
Dye it. Oh, I mean, I don't think Pepsi Man sticks around on our list. It's just it's a really bad one of those.
Well, there are no good one of those.
Also,
to be fair.
yes,
just that entire gameplay genre is just so brain dead.
Yeah,
I feel more passionately about Pepsi Man coming into this, but it is certainly not as bad as many of these other games.
It's hard to work myself up into a fervor over Pepsi Man after just immediately talking about Mario Party.
Fair enough. I would agree with that.
But yeah, I don't think it sticks on the list.
Also,
it was like a free thing. Not that should color the...
You get what you pay for.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. All right, next is Shadow Man. for the Windows, N64, PSX, and Dreamcast, hitting you everywhere it counts. Developed by Acclaim and published by them, game rankings of 75.85, which honestly is a lot higher than I thought it would be. Weirdly, this is the second game on this list to feature Jack the Ripper. So Shadow Man is I forget all the like particular lore about it, but basically Shadow Man is like it's like a Highlander situation. There can only ever be one Shadow Man, and I guess Jack the Ripper was one, and so you get some of that lore at the beginning of the game. But you play as a new dude who finds out he is Shadow Man. The main reason this game's bad is because it's really hard. And not because it needs to be hard or like is intentionally hard. Well, maybe it is intentionally hard, but it's like it's the bullshit hard because the controls are bad, the camera is bad, enemies lurk like just outside of the camera and kill you. The game will like intentionally play tricks on you. Like they will like with enemy placement and like the light puzzle mechanics. It's like a third-person action game, I should say. It's really hard and like bad. It takes itself seriously, but is also like unintentionally campy. It's a bad time playing it. They re-released Shadow Man. I think it's Shadow Man. Shadow Man Remastered. Didn't they do? Yes, they did do a remastered version of this. It's on Steam. Who did this to us? It was Night Dive. Okay, Night Dive did a Shadow Man remaster. So if you are interested in Shadow Man, you can look it up on Steam. It is $19.99 right now.
Night Dive usually does a pretty decent job.
Yeah, I don't think this is Night Dive's fault. I think the original material they're working with is very bad. Yeah, it's like it's got like weird themes on like voodoo and other stuff like that, which like I don't know enough about to say if it's respectful or not. Probably not. It has a lot of that 90s attitude, but it's also a little bit of that like Daikatana attitude where it's like this game's gonna fuck you. Like
right.
There's a little bit of that where I think it like has some of that energy of like it's hard because it's good because it's hard kind of a thing.
Yeah. Like a FromSoft. It's an early FromSoft game.
No, early FromSoft is Kingsfield. And this is certainly not that. Yeah, I think it's really bad and difficult. I don't know that I move it up though. Looking at the other games that are on that list, I just don't have a lot of like passionate feelings about Shadow Man.
Yeah, this was another one that I had zero memory of.
Okay,
so it's really a you call.
Okay, then yeah, if you don't have anything on it, then we can probably move past it. But if people are curious, if you're Shadow Man curious, there is that Night Dive remaster.
Speaking of Acclaim, this next game is also by Acclaim. South Park, Chef's Love Shack.
Oh, this is a legendarily bad game.
Yeah, this was out on Dreamcast, PC, and PlayStation 1. Game rankings, aggregate score of 51.86. This is a sort of game show style game with mini games, a very Double Dare style game, if you will. Yeah, man, it's fucking terrible. It is boring, which is insane to say about a South Park game.
Yeah.
The voice acting and the writing and just like the whole production and delivery, like it feels like people were working under threat of violence. Yeah, there's just no energy or passion to this game, and it sucks. I don't know what else to say. We talked about the South Park 3D, the N64 game.
Yeah,
I think it was 98, right?
Yeah,
like
I've not played Chef's Love Shack. I'm curious, like how you think these two stack up. I mean, they're very different, but
yeah, they're totally different games. I do think from a gameplay perspective, there is more going on in Chef's Love Shack because it's got a bunch of mini games and sort of like trivia stuff in its structure versus just like a open area fog based first person shooter like the South Park 3D game was. I think in execution, Chef's Love Shack is probably better and just more interesting because of that. But it truly is abysmal. Yeah. Whereas like the South Park game for the N64 feels like not like a cash in, but just like a low effort play. Chef's Love Shack feels like there was effort, but that effort was put forth under duress.
Like, so I don't know which or you won't see your
which of those again. Sounds worse.
Yeah. Interesting. Chef's Love Shack has trivia, so it's also the second trivia game.
Right. Yeah. Definitely a worse game than the Austin Powers trivia game, I would say. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think this is, you know, if not top 3, it's certainly one of the worst games on this list. I think it should stay.
Okay.
It would be pretty easy to just have a South Park game pretty much every year from here on out.
Yeah, I think you're right.
There are so many terrible South Park games.
Yeah. All right, the next one. Superman, the new Superman Adventures for N64, otherwise known as Superman 64. This was developed by Titus Interactive and published by them with a game rankings of... I believe this may be our lowest game rankings ever.
I don't think that is true. I think
we had an 18,
one that was like,
right?
Yeah, it was like 15 or 18 or something insane.
Well, this one is crazy low. It's 22.9.
Yeah, that's still really low.
Yes, this is in the grand pantheon of video games and the public consciousness where they intersect. This is one of the worst video games of all time.
Yeah,
hands down.
By the way, the 18 that we're thinking about was for Elf Bowling.
Bowling.
At least
it is
when
barely better than Elf Bowling.
Yeah, when it comes to an actual video game, like a real like actual video game, this is definitely the lowest.
Yes. Okay. Dan Reichert recently played through this video game on the website giantbomb.com on a feature known as Blight Club, where they go play old bad video games, and this one was called Super Dan 64, and he wore a Superman costume and fake Superman hair the whole time, and that part was great. What wasn't great was everything else, because watching him, this was not even, there were moments where it was fun to watch, but watching it was also its own trial. It is a game, structurally it alternates between flying levels where like the fog distance is extremely close and you are flying with
including inside
and you're flying with really bad inverted floaty N64 controls through rings, and if you miss a ring, if you miss too many rings, you have to start over. And there's always a time limit for some reason. You can fly fast or slow.
People are dying, bro. Superman's got to get there quick.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't know what the rings have to do with it. And so you have those levels, which actually end up being the best part of the game. Because after those levels, you have real video game where you're in like a building or a complex and you're running around on the ground as Superman, you know, famously runs around on the ground. You can fly, but it's indoors and is impossible.
They're small
areas because it's an N64. The combat, like, there's basically no feedback on if you're within range to fight. You have some powers, but you have to find pickups in the levels to be able to use the powers. Some of the enemies can just like chain you over and over and over again in a way that like you can't escape. Some of the levels are just broken, where if you go to certain areas, you'll fall out of the world. There's no satisfying... Okay. Here's the ending. I'm going to spoil the ending to Superman 64. You disarm some bombs, and you go through a teleporter, and you end up in a room with a very short time limit to fly to the end of the room towards a picture. There's a doorway, and inside the doorway is a JPEG of the words "the end." And you fly to the words "the end," and then the game ends, and there's like a screen with some text on it, and that's basically it. And that's,
I mean, that sounds awesome.
That's how the game ends. And it's just that it kind of alternates between really, really bad on foot sections and really, really bad flying sections. And there's kind of no reprieve from the madness.
Right. Yeah, this is a game, because I always like to watch gameplay of all these games just to help refresh my memory. This is a game that everybody talks about as being like top 2 in terms of worst games ever made, and maybe only behind the ET game. And it's you kind of internalize that, right? But it's hard to remember just how bad it truly is, because like in your mind you're like I'm watching all these other games, right? Like I'm watching gameplay of Castlevania 64, Duke. I'm like, man, these games fucking are terrible. And then you get to Superman 64 and you boot that up and you're like, oh my god, like I did not know how low it could go.
Right.
This game is truly just insanely bad. It's so I was speechless. I wasn't even trying to talk, and I was still speechless.
It is without peer, I think, this year.
Yes. I would agree.
So we're moving
There are years where there's an obvious winner for best game of the year.
Yeah.
Like in 96, right? Super Mario 64, one of the best games ever made. We knew going in it was going to be nigh impossible for another game to end up on top. That's kind of Superman 64 carries that kind of weight around it.
Oh yeah.
It has an aura.
Yep. It found all the pickups for its powers.
Yes.
Oh boy.
It is Superman 64 is
its own kryptonite.
The Will Smith interview where Jada Pinkett Smith is talking about cheating on him, and he's like, yeah, babe, I supported you during that. That's Superman 64.
Oh.
It's the lowest of Will Smith's volatile career.
Oi. Superman for life.
All right, next on the list, The Mask of Zorro for the Game Boy Color. This was developed by Sapphire, 2 Fs, not a PH, 2 Fs, because that's how you know they're cool, and published by Sunsoft with a game rankings of 38.33, which is also extremely low.
I've never heard of this.
I think the biggest reason this game has such a low ranking is because it doesn't fucking work.
Oh, no.
Like, this game is so busted. I remember playing it as a kid because I loved the Antonio Banderas Zorro movies.
Yes.
Part of that was because of Catherine Zeta-Jones. Let's all be real.
Doesn't hurt.
I was a young boy. But I remember being excited for this game because I loved Zorro. And I went as Zorro's fucking for Halloween one year.
Hell
I was like
yeah,
all
dude.
in on Zorro. And I loved the idea because like the combat is primarily like one-on-one, like tete-a-tete sword fighting, right? With like the rapiers and shit. And it's really cool in theory. But pretty much every time you play the game, and it's not that long of a game, at some point the enemy AI will break and the enemy will just be literally undefeatable. Like pretty much, like this game is nigh unbeatable because it will almost always glitch out at some point. When I was watching gameplay of these games, I went up and looked up like a long play of The Mask of Zorro, the Game Boy Color game. And in that video, the guy could not finish the game because after like a half hour, he came across one of these enemies. And so he put up a little disclaimer. He's like, hey, this happened. I'm not going to start over from scratch. Sorry, y'all. And the comments are just littered with people being like, hey, yep, that's exactly where that happened to me. Or, oh, you actually made it farther than I did because of this. Like, in taking that out of it, it's still not a fun game. Like, it looks really ugly. It's way more like 8-bit sort of style, like super heavy pixels. And one of the worst things about it is it tries to like tie into the actual Zorro stuff where they have these like static stills in between missions to set up the story where they try to actually do voiceover, which is pretty cool and ambitious in a Game Boy game, except for the fact that because it's a Game Boy game, all of the like vocal audio,
right, it's all garbled nonsense.
Like you can't hear anything that anyone is saying.
Totally.
And that is it is quite bad.
Those Game Boy speakers are real rough.
Yeah. In a year where Super Mario 64 did not exist, to me, Mask of Zorro would be a slam dunk winner. Like, Mask of Zorro is one of the worst handheld games that I have ever played, for sure. In a large part because it's fucking broken, which is bad enough. Like, we shouldn't give a game a pass for being bad because it just happened to also be super broken.
Totally. That's a great reason, yeah.
But even if it wasn't broken, it is super just unfun and hard to play.
All right, I have already moved it up.
Hate that game. Next game on the list, we can go ahead and cut. I wanted to call it out. Tomorrow Never Dies. This is another Bond game for the PlayStation 1, developed by Black Ops Entertainment and published by EA and MGM. Game rankings of 62.44. This, similar to Final Fantasy VIII, is mostly a call out of, this is the sequel to GoldenEye, and it's not good. It's not fun. It also went through a ton of delays. This game ended up coming out the same month as the next movie did. So it was supposed to come out alongside the release of Tomorrow Never Dies, but it didn't fucking make it. It came out when the next movie came out.
Crazy.
Which completely undermined, because the game was supposed to be a direct sequel, plot-wise, to the movie Tomorrow Never Dies. They ended up scrapping that because it was taking too long, and so they made it a completely different kind of story, which also doesn't make any fucking sense because it's the name of the movie. But yeah, this game's not good. It's mostly just that it's a disappointment to GoldenEye. It is not one of the worst games. But in rewatching it, the music kind of slaps, actually.
So,
the music's pretty good. So go check it out.
Like, how's this for timing? Yesterday, I played through all of Tomorrow Never Dies.
No way, for real?
Yeah, I actually played through all of it. So
Why?
So I'll talk about it on the next flagship pod. But my buddy is playing through all the old Star Wars games, and I'm watching him and like reading him the guide and stuff as he goes. I'm playing through all the James Bond games, and he's walking me through on the guide. And so I just played Tomorrow Never Dies actually today, and last night, today I played most of World Is Not Enough. I have one level left actually, nice. Time of recording, but Tomorrow Never Dies actually isn't that bad. It's like, it's a third person game, not a first person game, which is weird, but like, so the frame rate's really bad. Like the objectives are all really straightforward. There are only 10 levels. It's extremely short. But there is some cool stuff that you can do. Like you can crouch behind boxes by holding L1, and then you can hit the triggers to like do a cool combat roll. It's like you can kind of like edge up to corners in areas and do a cool combat roll where you're invincible out into the hallway and then like fire on the dudes who are there. So like there is actually some gameplay stuff that's kind of fun and cool happening in there. And yeah, the music is actually really good. It's really short. There are like a couple of skiing levels that are diabolically horrendous. But otherwise, I actually did kind of have a good time with Tomorrow Never Dies. I'll talk about it a little bit more in the flagship pod. But
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, just the timing of it was funny.
That is funny. All right, last game on the list is another Game Boy Color game, Toy Story 2. Not to be confused with the Toy Story 2 game. I think it came out the same year on PlayStation 1 that like people actually like. This is the one I played on the Game Boy. This is developed by Tiertex Design and published by THQ with a game rankings of 57.17. It's a collect-a-thon side-scrolling platformer. It's super boring. It's really ugly. The colors are extremely bland. There is very little fun or excitement in the design, which is like kind of the thing that Toy Story has going for it, is the cool toy atmosphere. This game just captures none of that. You play as Buzz, I guess I should say. Okay. And you're just like collecting shit, and that's the whole fucking thing.
Is it better than that first Toy Story game for the original Game Boy where you play as Woody? Because that game,
I don't remember that game.
That game is so bad. I still have that cartridge. And I don't think I'll ever get rid of it because of how angry it makes me to look at.
This came out in 95.
The original Toy Story one, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we talked about it, didn't we?
Did we? Yeah.
Let me look
it's
up
been so long ago.
games.
It was almost a year ago that we talked about it.
Suck 95. Let me look at the doc. Oh, did we not talk about this? We might have missed it. Was it 95 in the US? Or 96?
It was 95. Sorry. The Game Boy game was 96. It came out on Genesis and SNES in 95.
Okay. Games that suck. 96. We
might have missed it.
I think we missed it while we were going through. Fuck, we missed it.
We gotta go back and re-record, man.
Yep. Strike it from the record. Yeah, that original Toy Story game is rotten to the core.
I do not remember that one. I will just say it looks like a lot of people, well, in fairness, people are mostly scoring the like Genesis stuff.
Okay.
Which seems like people liked more.
This is one of those instances where the Game Boy version and the Genesis, the console version, were very different, maybe.
Of the original game.
Oh, I see.
This game only came out on Game Boy Color.
Okay, Toy Story 2 was Game Boy Color.
Yes, there was a game, Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue, which was a 3D game that came out on PlayStation 1.
Ooh.
But this is a completely different game.
When did that release?
And that same year, I think. Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue, also came out in 99. But I think people like that game.
All right.
I don't remember playing it.
What's the...
Came out on Dreamcast and PlayStation and N64. Oh,
received positive reviews, but it is like 58, 75. I guess it's mixed.
Awesome. But yeah, the Toy Story 2 Game Boy Color game is just a very boring collect-a-thon platformer. I don't know if it's worse than Earthworm Jim.
Okay.
I think it's certainly less... comparing the IP and the potential of the IP, it's certainly more disappointing than Earthworm Jim because it just has none of like the fun of Toy Story. But I think the way that the camera works in Earthworm Jim makes it a less fun game to play.
Okay.
So we can probably do without Toy Story 2, I think, with that in mind.
Okay.
And we have a very long short list, which I'm just now realizing.
Yeah, you're right. I am looking at gameplay of Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue on PlayStation X for $99. PlayStation X, PSX. This looks like it's totally fine and competent, but is like geared towards kids, and that's probably like the simplistic nature of it is probably what people had an issue with.
That makes sense.
But yeah, this looks totally fine. You play as like a cute, short, fat Buzz. Which that might be an aspect ratio thing, but that's okay. So yeah, I think we can... So you think we can not bring up Toy Story 2?
Yeah, I think it's okay to cut.
Okay. All right, well that takes us to the end of our long list. So our short list, just to go over the names here, we have BoomBots, Chocobo Racing, Duke Nukem 0 Hour, Earthworm Jim 3D, Earthworm Jim Menace to the Galaxy, Mario Party, South Park Chef's Love Shack, Superman 64, and The Mask of Zorro. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 1/3 of these video games get to stay. The other 2/3 have to go.
Yeah, and like let's be real, we're looking for 2 spots.
Correct, because Superman 64 is the number one.
Yes,
pretty sure.
Most definitely.
All right.
So I think, oh man, a lot of these games fucking suck.
I think Duke Nukem can go away.
I was gonna say, like, would you keep Earthworm Jim 3D or Duke Nukem?
I would keep Earthworm Jim.
Okay, it seemed to me like Duke Nukem was worse.
I think it's like... No, because I think you can still play it. Earthworm Jim 3D is kind of unplayable.
Okay.
And also, like, I'm not disappointed in Duke Nukem for not handling its themes sensitively. I am disappointed in Earthworm Jim 3D for like not having anything that the IP, like anything
just not
cool
being
or
fun.
fun from the IP.
Yeah, that's fair.
How do you feel about Chocobo Racing?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think we can go ahead and cut Chocobo Racing, which stinks because it's the only, like, so many of these other games are similar to each other, right? Like a lot of them are like 3D-ish kind of games, and it's the only really racing game.
Yeah.
But I looking at the rest of this list, I think it's okay to cut. This might be a boring approach or answer, but to me, taking Superman 64 out of it, the other three worst to me are BoomBots, South Park, and Mask of Zorro.
So not Mario Party?
I kind of said my piece about Mario Party.
Yeah, we're not gonna.
It definitely deserved to be on the long list,
but
that's
it deserves to be on the short list, and it is.
Okay. Yes.
I'm okay with it not.
If that makes you feel better.
It does. It does. Death to Mario Party. death to tyrants. So you said your three would be not without Superman. Your three would be BoomBots, South Park, and Zorro. Yeah,
like I would cut both Earthworm Jims and leave those remaining 4 games.
I care more about Earthworm Jim than I do BoomBots.
Okay.
From a keeping it standpoint.
Okay. That tracks. I mean, I'm okay to let the Game Boy Color Earthworm Jim go, because you have more passion for the 3D one than that one, which is fine.
Okay.
Which gets us down to 4 games fighting for 2 spots: BoomBots, Earthworm Jim 3D, South Park Chef's Love Shack, and Mask of Zorro.
Okay.
I just feel like, I mean, maybe it's just...
Mask of Zorro is like, the fact that I've never played it, but the fact that it is broken, that makes me feel like it should be included, because like it's... But we only have... The problem is we have 3 spots.
I know, like I said when I was talking about it, if it weren't for Superman 64, I would definitely fight for Mask of Zorro to win. I absolutely believe it belongs on the top 3 or bottom 3. And to me, it's between Chef's Love Shack and BoomBots. But if you are fighting for Earthworm Jim, I could see that. I guess I would take Chef's Love Shack over both of those games anyway. Like, to me, the list is Superman 64, Mask of Zorro, and Chef's Love Shack. All 3 of those games are just horrendous.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that, actually.
Because Earthworm Jim definitely sucks. And it is weird to... I guess Superman 64 is a 3D game.
It is.
So I was going to say, it's weird to have so many bad 3D games.
Yeah, because like...
it's funny, I put Superman 64 in a different category, because it doesn't even feel like a traditional 3D game.
It's just so bad. It transcends categorization.
Yeah. It's its own genre.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with those 3. I'm trying to think. I don't have a lot of passion for BoomBots, so I think I'm fine leaving that behind no matter what. And if you're not going to fight for it above the other ones, then that's okay. Earthworm Jim 3D, I would take that over South Park.
Okay.
So let's lock in Mask of Zorro, because I do agree. I think that should be on there for sure. So Earthworm Jim or South Park. I wish I could just say, oh, it's just another bad South Park game, but it's bad in so many different ways from the original South Park game. That's bad.
Yep. And ironically, South Park, the 3D game, didn't make our top 3. We ended up cutting it.
That's true.
Because it was bad in more of a boring way, which Chef's Love Shack is not bad in a boring way.
Yeah, I don't really remember playing Chef's Love Shack. Talk me through it one more time.
Yeah, it's structured like a trivia game with like Chef as the host,
Right.
where you're being asked questions and you answer them, and then you do basically a bunch of mini games. So it's kind of, it doesn't have the board game aspect of a Mario Party, but it's sort of structured in a similar way where like you take turns and then you do mini games.
I'm sold.
And it's just comparing it to Mario Party.
I'm sold. You got it.
Yeah, it's not like, it doesn't control as bad as Earthworm Jim, right? Because there's just less to do in the game. It's more about the tone is off, it's low effort, and the mini games are actually pretty janky.
Okay. All right. So our bottom 3 games that suck of 1999 are in no particular order, but maybe in the proper order. Superman 64, Mask of Zorro, and South Park Chef's Love Shack.
Yeah, I mean, I think
that's probably the order, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, yeah. Superman 64, bad in every way, including being broken. Mask of Zorro, a bad game, but also horrendously broken. And South Park Chef's Love Shack, a very bad game. That isn't mechanically interesting. Yeah, isn't mechanically interesting enough to be broken in any interesting ways. It is just very bad.
Yes.
Okay.
Man, the writing in that game, it's disappointing.
Yeah. And a close runner-up, Earthworm Jim 3D.
Yeah, Earthworm Jim. Yeah, that game is also. It's stinky.
Yes.
These are some stinky games.
The top 3 fromages of 1999. That's French for cheese, I think. In the number 3 spot, South Park Chef's Love Shack. The number 2 spot, The Mask of Zorro. And the worst, stinkiest video game of 1999 is Superman... The New Superman Adventures? Is that the original name? Yes. Superman, The New Superman Adventures, otherwise known as Superman 64.
Why are you saying that like it's a weird name? That sounds like a totally normal name.
To have the word... That's like saying Batman, The New Batman Game Adventures Batman. To say it twice... Anyways. Those are 3 bad games. Congratulations. We're rolling out the red carpet for you, Stinky Cheeses. You can keep the carpet. I don't want to pay for it to be dry cleaned after. Shay, thank you for coming along with me on this podcast journey through time and space.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about some good video games next month.
Me too. I think that's going to be a really fun one. As always, as we scroll through the list looking for bad video games, I am looking at all of the good video game names and wishing I could click on those instead. Right. So this is going to be a really fun one in September for games that don't suck of 1999.
Spyro 2, Chrono Cross.
And then
Legacy of Kain.
After next month, we're done with the 90s.
Yeah, man. Like I said, it's the Willennium.
Willennium. All right, everyone. Hey, thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. You can email us at info@ShayHatesEverything.com. That's info@ShayHatesEverything.com. Let us know what you think the worst games of 1999 are. Did we miss something? Did we talk about a game that's actually one of your favorite video games? Don't tell me that, because I'll think less of you as a human.
Mario Party.
You can find the Shay Hates Everything podcast wherever you engage with your podcasts. So be sure to subscribe, leave a rating or review, tell your friends, bring people into the fold, get some more haters on in here. I don't know what the community members should be called. I just assign them haters because the Shay Hates Everything label.
That's not bad.
That's not bad. Also maybe a little dated, but that works for us because we're elder millennials. Thanks for listening, everyone.
The acronym of Shay Hates Everything, SHE, she, so we could just call everyone feminists. That's not taken, right? Like, that'll be super relevant, and no one would have a negative reaction to that, right?
Thanks for listening, everyone. We're going to get Duke Nukem out of here and talk to you all at the first thing in September with a new episode of the flagship podcast. That's going to be Monday, September 2nd. You're all beautiful, wonderful people. Have a fantastic rest of your August. Keep gaming. And don't go look up Shadow Man.